So yesterday we have talked a bit about Selenium and the evolution of the Selenium, right? And now today, let's deep dive into its architecture. So how the architecture of Selenium WebDriver is and how it works ideally, and try to understand a bit on how this particular Selenium architecture it interacts with the browser, right? So let's talk in those lines. Yeah. Okay. So let me share my screen. Are you able to see it? Able to see the screen? Yeah. Great. Okay. So let's talk this, right? So yesterday I have shown you the Selenium Dev website, and within that I asked you to download Selenium WebDriver, right? The latest version for the .NET framework. So anyone downloaded this one? Has anyone downloaded it? Yes, no?
No.
Okay, fine. So we have seen in the website, like for .NET, there is certain version of Selenium driver. And in the similar way for Ruby, Python, Java, we have separate installables, right? I mean, sorry, separate downloadables, correct? Have you seen that? So that is something called as Selenium client library, right? So we need this Selenium client library in order to automate or come up with our scripting, right? This client library helps for our scripting. Okay. So if you want to identify an element, yesterday we have seen there are certain elements, right? Web elements. So if you want to work on any of these elements, probably you would require the client library first, right? So that's why we download the client library first. So now what happens? So how this client library is able to understand your script and then proceed further to interact with your browser, right? So web applications, we open them in the browser, right? And we also discussed that um, we have support from Selenium for what is that? Firefox, Internet Explorer, um, Chrome, and any, what was that? Probably Opera, right? All other browsers. So for any of these browsers, so Selenium is able to support and it is able to interact with those browsers. If you are giving some script to open the browser, so it is able to open that specific browser, right? If you are trying to provide some URL, so it is able to provide that URL into the uh, into the taskbar, and then it is able to load that page for us, right? So how this particular scripting is able to interact with the Selenium server. So how that happens internally? It happens through JSON wire protocol. JSON wire protocol. Okay. So you can see here. So you have this JSON wire protocol, which would work for us to interact or convert each of these commands. Whatever Selenium has got, there is a client library, right? So you have downloaded some library. This library contains this library contains some set of interfaces, classes with some methods in it. So now what we would learn about these methods. We would learn about these interfaces. We would learn about these classes, whichever are probably grouped in this particular Selenium client library. Using only those methods and using those classes, so we would be able to come up with our script. So when we come up with our script, when we try to execute it, what happens? The JSON wire protocol that would integrate us or that would communicate, that acts as a mediator for us, right? So this protocol would transfer the data. So whatever request like open the browser or provide the URL or click on a button. So these commands would be converted into the system understandable, or rather I can say like the server understandable language, and it would push those requests onto this browsers, whichever browser we are trying to work on, right? So now we have a client library which we would be able to download. In the similar way, we also have browser drivers. Okay, so each browser has specific driver for it. Okay, so what we do, we download this client library. In the similar way, we have this driver for Chrome. If at all you are using Chrome driver, right? So you would be able to interact with Chrome. If you are using Gecko driver, you would be able to interact with Firefox, right? So likewise, there are various drivers that it has got. So we also do download them. So now what happens when we have our project, right, created? So we would have this client library added and the driver added into our project, such that we would be able to make this Selenium interact through the browser that we selected. So now if you want all of these like multiple browsers to work at a time, so probably you would have those many drivers added into your project, such that you would be able to work on multiple browsers, right? So it enables the multi-browser testing as well for us, correct? So now what happens? So over the HTTP, right? JSON wire protocol over the HTTP, right? What is this HTTP? Hypertext Transfer Protocol, right? It's one more networking protocol. So what happens? So that means we need internet, right? We need internet to interact with the applications. So all our interaction can happen if and only when you have the internet, right? So you have this connectivity over the HTTP request. So any request, any command that we give, right? So are communicated through the HTTP protocol. So through the HTTP protocol, that particular request or that particular command would be triggered onto the browser to the selected driver, right? Based upon the selected driver. So if you have selected Chrome driver, so you would work on Chrome browser. Likewise it is. So now this interaction, right? So whichever browser it is. So if I have web Chrome driver, so Chrome driver would be able to interact with the Chrome browser over the internet. And then if it is a Gecko driver, it is for this. If it is Internet Explorer driver, so it would be for Internet Explorer, likewise, right? So this is how it triggers the execution, and then it converts the request or the script that we have into what is that? The JSON wire protocol over the HTTP, and then trigger those requests onto the browsers based upon whichever driver we have selected. So this is how Selenium works, right? Initially, they have planned with this one. Okay. So now what happened? So when they have come up with this kind of architecture, for version 2, 3. So we had this architecture, okay, with JSON wire protocol. So now when they have come up with this kind of architecture, they have seen certain, what we say, like drawbacks, right? Though we are able to automate, they have also seen certain drawback. So what is the drawback? Anyone? No? Okay. So when this kind of architecture, which was followed previously in Selenium 3, right? So till Selenium 3, they have followed this JSON wire protocol over HTTP. And then for each browser, there is a specific web driver, right? So now when they followed this way, this manner, so it is bit, you know, what we say, like it requires significant amount of resources. When I say resources, it is about your CPU, your memory, and your bandwidth, right? So if you have, let's say, very less speed internet, okay, your broadband is somewhere around 10 Mbps or 30 Mbps. Okay, let's take such a slow internet. Okay, or if you have very less CPU or a memory in your system. Okay, so if you want to bring in this Selenium architecture, this particular way of Selenium architecture which we have is a heavy load. Okay, so what happens? It needs very intensive or intensive amount of resources, including CPU, memory, and the bandwidth. So you would see the slowness in the execution. Okay, that's one thing. And the other part is the way how it is getting interacted. So you have two things here. One is your client library. The other one is your, again, a specific driver for each of the browsers, right? So now this conversion of each of these requests, right, into the understandable format. So for that, the trigger is this JSON wire protocol over HTTP. And every time, whenever it tries to interact and then trigger this call, so this call, which it is being made, is very slow because it's an indirect call, right? First, it would invoke the browser. And once the browser is invoked, then only it would be able to trigger your request or trigger your script, right? Are you getting this point? So this conversion of this particular commands that are related to this Selenium itself, right? They have given the Selenium package, that client library, and they in the sense the development team which has come up with this, that is Apache, right? Apache company, they have come up with this Selenium, and now they have that library with certain interfaces, classes, and within those they have defined certain methods which we wanted to use. Now this interaction, the way how it is defined, so this actually is very slow. When you have probably less number of test cases, you might not feel that heat, okay, of the execution time. But for us, execution time is also very much important in the day-to-day activities, right? When you come up with some thousands of test cases which need to be executed, let's say like for each of this conversion or for uh, triggering that event of opening a browser, right? Initiating that particular trigger itself would take, let's say, 30 seconds. I am just counting on seconds. Okay. So let's say, for example, it takes 30 seconds. Now for running these 1000 test cases, which actually involve your flow of invoking the application, logging into the application, doing some activity, and then again logging out, close the browser, again open the browser, do the activity, close the browser, right? Likewise. So in such instances, so let's take like 1000 test cases, 1000 into 30 seconds. So how much it would be? 30,000 seconds. So when it is holistically, when it is, huge set of test cases which we need to execute. So at that time, we are having this unwanted delay. This delay is something, this delay is something cannot be ignored, right? Because it has to interact with your browser. For interacting with your browser itself, probably it takes 30 seconds each time, right? So in such scenarios, so this 30,000 seconds of time which you are investing just to invoke the browser, interaction with the browser, is something we call it as slowness, right? So this slowness is something which we see in the Selenium at grid level as well, right? Selenium grid, because in the Selenium grid, so we come up with a server, Selenium server, and then that Selenium server is connected to various client machines, and your scripts would be executed on different client machines at a time in parallel, right? So now when we get this parallelism concept, that is nothing but your Selenium grid. So at that time as well, so you would be, what is that? You would be wantedly or unwantedly would be investing this much amount of time for each of the interaction that is being made onto your browser, right? So now that's where it it is bit slow compared to some other existing tools in the market. Okay, so probably Playwright or what was that? Cypress, which um executes directly within the browser, right? This particular Selenium is trying to trigger the request sitting outside the browser, right? Now, when it comes to Cypress, it sits within the browser and then just simply triggers the execution within no time, right? So there are some tools which are faster than Selenium. Okay. So now we have discussed about the drawbacks, but still, why we have this Selenium more prominent in the market? Why is it so?
Open source.
Sorry, come again.
Open source.
Open source, even the other tools, Playwright and all are also open source. But still Selenium is more prominent, no?
Because it's giving the more library file supporting purpose.
So it has got the extent of the coverage, the automation coverage that we can provide by using Selenium is very more, right? Way more than other tools. So even if you go for Cypress, so Cypress cannot handle what is that? Uh, Multiple tabs in a browser, right? Or multiple windows in a browser, pop-up windows. So it cannot handle it. So at that time, you would again feel, okay, this tool is faster, but it is not fulfilling all the scenarios for us, right? So some are the other scenarios, again, you would need to sit and manually verify probably. So the out of scope items for the other tools are little more compared to Selenium. Selenium has just this slowness. So this is something probably may not be ignored, but still it is what is it? We can deal with it. We can live with it, right? So that's where people use Selenium. So it has got extensive client library, which deals with almost all the operations, mouse move, pointer, mouse click, double click. You can scroll up, scroll down. You can drag and drop, right? All these events, mouse events, whatever you can do, those can also be managed by using Selenium, right? Multiple browsers, multiple windows within the browser, and what was that? The pop-up windows. At times, if you see like um, when you try to submit application, so you would get a pop-up window stating like your submission is successful, and then you would see a OK button and a cancel button for it, right? So those kind of pop-up windows, so it can handle them. And just in case if you cannot uh, trigger some events, right, based on the um default methods, right? So you can even use JavaScript executor here. So you can use involve JavaScript binding over the Selenium such that it could probably execute your scripts accordingly, right? So we can use JavaScript binding as well, right? So these many advantages are there. So every tool comes up with certain advantages and certain disadvantages. So when it comes to Selenium, it has more advantages, right? And rather, uh, it also got lots of resources who learn it and lots of resources who work on it, right? So it is probably some universally accepted tool for test automation. So default, people just simply go with Selenium because your methods, the client library, what is that? So the library that you are downloading, so it has interfaces, classes with methods, I said, right? All these methods are same ones. If you have C sharp, still your methods and interfaces would be same. If you download Java, so it works for Java, but the methods which it come with are same. If it is Python, so the package you download would be in Python language, right? The client library would be in the Python language, but your methods are same. So whatever methods you learn during this sessions for C sharp, those are also applicable for Java, Python, or Ruby, or any other scripting language which Selenium supports. You no need to worry about those stuff, right? Your Selenium scripting, I mean your Selenium level methods, those won't change. Only thing that changes is your language. Your syntax to your language would change. But the Selenium talks in the same methods, right? So even if it is C sharp, Java, later on if somebody says, I have a Python project and I want you to be onboarded to Python project, probably you might require to learn only Python, that's all, right? Your client library, Selenium client library has all these methods which are common across the languages. That's why it is called as a client library, right? And independent to the languages, right? Clear on this part? Good to proceed further. Shall I proceed further?
Yes.
Okay. So now, okay. So, okay. So now let's try to understand the latest architecture. So Selenium has come up with some latest architecture as well. Okay. So what is that? So instead of JSON wire protocol, now Selenium has replaced it with some other protocol. So what is it? So what they did, they have now used W3C protocol. W3C protocol. Okay. Instead of this JSON wire protocol, now what they did, they have come up with W3C. Okay. So let me write it down in some other. So this particular part. So this, they now call it as W3C. What is this W3C? What is this W3C? Any idea? World Wide Web. WWW. Right? World Wide Web Consortium. So this World Wide Web Consortium, they have certain standards on how to interact with the browsers, right? So when you see your what was that? Cypress or Playwright, okay? Any other tools, they use this latest standards instead of this JSON wire protocol. So till Selenium 3, till Selenium 3.0. So we in the sense Selenium used JSON wire protocol. So once you know the evaluation, see this evaluation. So how it is. So they never stopped this evaluation, right? So there are some other tools in the market which came up with prominent, standards, more, more, what we can say like reliable standard, and then they were using it. So it doesn't mean that Selenium did not use it, right? They also came up with Selenium, that is Selenium 4. So from Selenium 4.0, what they did, okay, we also update our architecture, right? With World Wide Web Driver Protocol. So what is that? W3C, World Wide Web Consortium. So World Wide Web Consortium Web Driver, right? So W3C Web Driver Protocol, right? So they replaced this JSON wire protocol with W3C WebDriver protocol. So this is something which standardizes our communication with the client. That is nothing but your test script, right? So client is here with the client library and the scripting, right? So how it communicates between the browser and the test script. So it eliminated the legacy JSON wire protocol translation layer. So this is the translation layer, no, I am talking about, and its slowness as well. So JSON wire protocol, the conversion of each of these requests so into the understandable language and then push it onto the network and then start interacting with the browser. So now they eliminated this part. They replaced this with W3C WebDriver protocol. Okay. So what this would ensure? So direct interaction with the WebDriver and the browser. So there is no conversion required. Okay, so direct communication it is. So it has the capability to test the reliability and compatibility with the browsers. So it has got enhanced test reliability and as well as compatibility with the browsers. So for example, so as I told you previously, so for Firefox, it is Gecko driver. For Chrome, it is Chrome web driver. And for Internet Explorer, it is an Internet Explorer web driver. Now, those many web drivers are not required to be downloaded, right? So those many are not required. It's only one, that is your WebDriver API. So if you have one web driver, Selenium web driver, right? So that's all enough. So the Selenium WebDriver itself is enabled to interact with any of the browsers. So if you say it is Chrome driver, so it would interact with Chrome. If you say it is Gecko WebDriver, it would interact with Firefox. Likewise it is. You no need to separately again download what is that? The browser specific web drivers, right? So that's something which it has come up with. Okay. So Selenium 4.0 is the latest version that we would be going to use. And what are the other latest editions that we have got? So as we know, or we have discussed in the previous session, that in order to identify the, in order to identify the, in order to identify these web elements, so we use locators. Okay, so we use locators. Selenium uses locators. So there are some 8 locators. Okay, apart from those 8, there are 4 more ways of identifying the elements, and that is being included in Selenium 4.0 because we got our web driver, W3C web driver, right? That's why it is possible. Okay, so this latest architecture where it removes this, your client libraries as is, your web drivers as well, browser drivers. So it is only one single web driver and you need to just mention the name of the driver. That's all. So the single driver would interact with any browser, whichever you mention in that particular driver. Clear on this part? So that's something which newly they have come up with. So the components, the core components in the new architecture are as follows. Okay. So first one would be your test script. It's same. Test script is there even previously as well, right? So test script that would have your client library for interactions, right? And then the language bindings. So Selenium provides its client library with various methods, various classes, right? Using which we can interact with the browser. Okay. So that is your language binding. It is already there. And the third component is your WebDriver API. So here it is WebDriver API. So you use this WebDriver API. This is a client side interface. Right? So it's your W3C WebDriver, right? Protocol. So this API uses this protocol and then interact with the browsers. Instead of having these many browser drivers, so you would have only one driver and one single API call, right? WebDriver API call. And what else? So in the new architecture, so we have got the browser driver, that is only one driver. Okay. And then the browsers. And then the browsers. Various browsers, whichever you want to keep, and then execute your tests, right, on multiple browsers. And the other component is your Selenium grid. So Selenium grid is there previously as well, now as well. It's grid 4, Selenium grid 4, right? It is redesigned as well. So Selenium grid, we will anyway talk in detail about this, and as well as we would have the demos related to the setup as well in the upcoming sessions. So before that, we need to cover our basics and then as well as our Selenium related locators and XPaths. So we need to, complete various other, what we say, like concepts, and then we would jump into the Selenium grid for the parallel execution, right? So this is how it is. So how it interacts? So you would have first your test script. From the test script, once you trigger, so your triggering would be to WebDriver API, and WebDriver API just takes the data and then it pushes to the browser driver. So that is nothing but your WebDriver W3C WebDriver, right? So it pushes to the browser driver, and then it interacts with the browser. That's all. So this is how the event would route. So test script, from the test script through the WebDriver API. So it would invoke the browser using your browser driver, that is W3C WebDriver protocol. Simple. So it is a direct interaction. Your communication is altogether direct. There is no other, conversions here, right? Whatever script you have written, whatever request you have initiated or triggered during your execution, it would be directly interacting with your browser. So that conversion is not there. So some time is saved for us, right? Clear on this part about Selenium 4.0? So there is no translation layer to transform your data, convert it, and then send it into the network, right? So you have a improved performance, right? And then some advanced ways of interacting with the elements is also available. These are the two advantages that we have when we are using the Selenium 4.0, the latest version, right? Clear on this? Any questions still here?
After test scripts, always we are doing the WebDriver API or only WebDriver.
It's a WebDriver API call through which these test scripts would be executed. That's why I have written in such manner.
In real time also you can do same thing only. Always WebDriver
We
API.
always do that because
Okay.
you would have that WebDriver, no?
Yes, yes.
Uh,
API is
so,
different or both are same.
sorry, come again.
API is different from a WebDriver or both are same.
WebDriver itself, it's an API. Okay, it's
API.
a service for us.
Okay.
So this service is interacting with the server, right? So how this microservices work? If you see in your microservice architecture, so APIs or the microservices, those are the services, right? You would have an endpoint, and
Okay.
that particular endpoint would be interacting with the server, correct? So here
Yes.
as well, we have our client library, we have our WebDriver. So this WebDriver API internally take your request and then perform the actions accordingly. So
Okay.
for you to look and feel it, so you would have your client library, Selenium client library, which you downloaded, and then your WebDriver. Okay, once we start our setup installation, so you would be able to understand this. Okay, so I will again recap this and then show you on how these interactions are being done, right?
Okay.
So you would have your client library that we download from the Selenium dev portal, and then within the sorry within the Visual Studio. So again, we would have our NuGet package. Okay, we will talk about NuGet as well. What this NuGet is, what are these packages? Okay, and as well as In case if we need to install any other packages other than the WebDriver and other stuff, so how we do it? So we would anyway talk about those. Okay. So when you install this WebDriver, Selenium WebDriver NuGet package into your project, so that's at the project level. You have a setup. Uh, and then this Selenium client library. That's all are required for you to start interacting with your application or your web elements on the application, right? Or start interacting with the browsers. So for that, we only need those. That's all. Nothing else.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions till here? In our history, Selenium history, from where it started altogether, from where it till where it got evolved. So this is the old, right? Old architecture till Selenium 3. And for the Selenium 4, this JSON wire protocol, it is replaced with W3C WebDriver protocol. And it's all the API request. So there is no conversion involved here. It's only your test script, whatever Selenium script you have come up with by using C# or Java or Ruby or Python. So it is directly just interacting with your browser. It takes the action, the communication related to that particular action, and then just apply on the browser. That's all. No conversions here. That's why it is W3C WebDriver protocol, which is much faster compared to this JSON wire protocol, where various conversions are also required, right? So that's how it is. Clear on this part? Right? So if we are clear, then I would stop this session here itself for today. Tomorrow we would start with our initial setup. So for the initial setup, so as I informed, we would use Visual Studio Community version. Community, okay, Community 2022. So this probably you can, what is that? Download and keep it. Okay, from Visual Studio, from the Microsoft website, and then from the Selenium dev, Selenium 4 point whatever latest version it is, stable version, right? For C# .NET or .NET, right? So these two you can download and install. Sorry, download and keep it ready for tomorrow's session, right? I will probably also share the link on the group from where you can download this. Okay, so that you people can just simply download and keep it. Installation and all we will do it tomorrow. So I have a document related to the installation as well. So I would showcase that document and then we will follow step by step. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.